Glad you're here for Unintended Consequences, episode 30. It's June 15th, 2026, Monday, a fresh case to chew on as the week begins. On a Tuesday morning in May 2018, millions of Europeans opened their browsers to find every major site suddenly interrupted by a rectangular box asking them to accept or manage cookies. The banners appeared because the General Data Protection Regulation had just come into force, requiring explicit consent before websites could store or access information on a user's device. The intention was straightforward: give people meaningful control over their personal data. Instead, the most common result was a new, repetitive click that users performed without reading a word. The GDPR grew out of more than a decade of European concern about online tracking. Lawmakers in the European Parliament and the European Commission had watched advertising networks build detailed profiles across sites without users realizing the extent of the collection. Earlier rules in the 2002 e-privacy directive had required consent for cookies, but left the method of obtaining it vague, so companies could rely on implied agreement or pre-checked boxes that users rarely noticed. By 2016, when the final GDPR text was agreed, regulators believed that mandating clear, affirmative consent would shift power back to individuals and force companies to be more transparent. The approach reflected a long-standing European view that data protection is a fundamental right rather than purely a consumer issue. Officials expected websites to offer simple choices and users to engage with those choices thoughtfully. The regulation took effect on May 25, 2018. Overnight, sites serving European users added consent interfaces to avoid fines that could reach 4% of global turnover. Many companies adopted off-the-shelf banner scripts from vendors such as OneTrust and CookieBot because building compliance systems quickly was difficult. Early audits by regulators in France and Germany found that some banners made refusal noticeably harder than acceptance, yet most sites still displayed some form of notice. Proponents pointed to increased awareness of data practices and a wave of privacy policy updates. A smaller group of privacy advocates warned that the sheer volume of notices would overwhelm users, and that the technical definition of consent was already being stretched. Within months, it became clear that the banners were being treated as obstacles rather than decision points. Studies conducted in 2019 and 2020 showed that the large majority of users clicked accept within seconds, often on the first or second visit to a site. The interfaces frequently presented accept all as the most prominent button while burying granular controls behind additional clicks. This design pattern arose because publishers needed to maintain advertising revenue and because the regulation did not specify exact visual requirements. One might ask whether sites could simply have made every option equally visible, but without a rule spelling out button size, color contrast, or click depth, the path of least resistance favored quick acceptance to keep ad auctions running smoothly. The result was banner fatigue. Users learned to dismiss the notices automatically, reducing the likelihood they would ever examine what data was being collected. A second-order effect appeared in the legal landscape. Regulators issued guidance and occasional fines, yet enforcement remained uneven across member states, leaving companies uncertain which banner designs would survive scrutiny. Some sites began experimenting with consent or paywalls, requiring payment for an ad-free, non-tracked experience. This practice, still under active review by data protection authorities, created a new tension between privacy and access. Over time, the cumulative effect was a widespread sense that consent had become a procedural checkbox rather than an informed choice, undercutting the very goal that GDPR had set out to achieve. European regulators have continued to refine expectations through updated guidance and court rulings, yet the banners remain in place. A few national authorities have pushed for simpler reject all options at the same prominence as accept all, and some browsers now offer broader controls that can override site-level banners. At the same time, the e-privacy regulation, intended to replace the older cookie rules, has been delayed for years. The current state is therefore one of incremental adjustment rather than wholesale replacement. The notices are still ubiquitous, but their legal and technical surroundings keep shifting. Complex consent requirements can be difficult to translate into interfaces that people will actually use. When the cost of genuine choice is high for both users and publishers, workarounds tend to appear that satisfy the letter of the rule while avoiding its spirit. Systems that rely on repeated individual decisions also risk training people to ignore the very signals meant to protect them. The experience invites a practical question for any future privacy or consumer protection rule. How will ordinary users encounter this obligation on a typical Tuesday, and what will they actually do? That's unintended consequences for today. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with a friend who'd appreciate the story. Subscribe wherever you listen, and we'll be back tomorrow with another case. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give SpaceX Daily a listen, the daily companion for following SpaceX as a public company, from Starship to the stock ticker. You can explore the whole lineup at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.